Greetings once again, my friends, and welcome back to Drak Reviews as we take on yet another Bethesda title. People might know on the channel I'm not the biggest Bethesda fan, mainly because I don't play Elder Scrolls or Fallout, but occasionally, Bethesda does tend to wow me in some of the games that they've come out. In particular, last year I did a review of Doom 2016, and even though I gave it high marks, yeah, it wasn't the greatest game that I actually was able to play, but I still gave high marks for it. And this is another game that had me at least interested in E3 2016 when I believe it was announced, and also in E3 2017 where we got official news from it. So Prey is published by Bethesda, but it is made by Arkane Studios, and it's actually kind of a retool, a remake, the way I understand it, from the original Prey games. Even this is basically taking place in some kind of an alternate timeline or something like that, and is ultimately a reboot for the series. So, without further ado, can they actually wow me? Let's find out. First of all, with the story. Okay, so the story follows Morgan Yu, either male or female, a scientist on the space station known as Talos 1. At least, that's the way it's supposed to go. What you originally know at the beginning of the game is that you're still on Earth trying to get the Talos project approved, and then realize that you've been being lied to this entire time. You've been on Talos 1 the entire time, and it's been overrun by a species known simply as the Typhon. So at that point, the goals of the game become Morgan trying to survive in this derelict Talos 1, where virtually most of the human population has been killed off by the Typhon, and either your goal can either be to destroy it because you want to make sure that this infection doesn't get to Earth, or supposedly you're also kind of infected with it to take an escape pod and return to Earth. It's kind of vague that way because Bethesda. So at that point, the story basically becomes exploring through Talos 1, learning about its past, learning its secrets, also getting discussions with your brother Alex Yu, as well as two beings known as simply as January and December, kind of fueling either way. And I have my own theories about that particular character, but roughly it's supposed to be kind of a BioShock-esque game in space. And I use that term not loosely, but I honestly think that this is basically Prey becoming BioShock. And I even said it in my Drak tries of it. And I wasn't necessarily against that. But again, back to the story before we get into that, I didn't necessarily give it high marks. And one of the main reasons I didn't was eventually, after a while, even though there are a couple of cool moments, I stopped caring about the story. I've got to be honest. This was supposed to be like a horror game based in space, and while I will admit that occasionally I did get the occasional jump scare from a Typhon mimicking something else and then jumping out of nowhere, that's pretty much where it ended, and the story was so few and far between, I stopped caring about it. And when I would get those dialogue options, they would be so vague anyway that it was like, I'll just go keep exploring and see if this can be redeemable in other ways. So I will admit I did mark some stuff off for the story. Visuals. This is another hit or miss. I do think the game looks very beautiful when it comes to the setting that you're in. When it comes to looking out the window and seeing space out there, that's amazing. When it comes to looking around Talos 1, it looks great. And it looks like it is a space station that's kind of, I want to say, like 1920s or 1960s inspired. So it looks good. The character models are where I kind of tilt my head. Some of them have kind of the same problem as Mass Effect Andromeda did, where they look kind of dirty to me. But then there are also some really good clean models that I do like. In particular, I do like the models for Morgan Yu when you can pick your character. He looks very clean, looks very average. I was okay with it. But then you get to like Alex Yu, where he looks kind of dirty. I have to tilt my head at that one. Thankfully, though, a lot of the other models that I came across with people, I'm not saying the face was obscure, but it was usually hidden. Like they were too far away to see, or they were in a spacesuit. So I thought that was actually a step in the right direction in that regard. But I did actually take some points off for visuals. Gameplay, again, this is supposed to be like BioShock, where you're constantly collecting from cabinets and whatnot throughout the whole place. And instead of the splicers that you were going to be dealing with in BioShock, in this one you deal with the Typhon. And the Typhon can have various forms, like the basic mimics, or you can have full-on phantoms. And even later, they actually start to infest the tech as well. So a lot of the operators that you come across can actually be infested by the Typhon to be used that way. And for the most part, I actually found the gameplay enjoyable. I actually did find a lot of moments where I thought it was really satisfying to be able to kill off a mimic. I will say this, though, since this is supposed to be like a horror game, it wasn't very scary. I would actually dare say that BioShock is probably a bit more scary, and simply because of the splicers and their erratic behavior. But like I said, I got a few jump scares from the mimics. After a while, though, it became very clear that you were having to deal with a phantom in a room or with a mimic in the room, and therefore a lot of that atmosphere was kind of lost. So I will give it the points there for the occasional jump scares, but in the rest, yeah, the atmosphere was there, but I wasn't necessarily scared, in the same kind of horror way that, say, Dead Space or Resident Evil would have done it. But it is solid gameplay, although I will say this, there are a lot of points where I feel that BioShock does this formula better than Prey. And I'm not necessarily knocking Prey for that. I think this was a rough reboot and therefore has to be kind of considered a first entry. But BioShock was also a first entry, and I feel like it did a lot of these concepts a little bit better. So I will admit I did take off some points for gameplay. Moving on into audio, this is also where I took a lot of points off because everybody in it, as much as I know a lot of big names went into Prey, the performances were generic at best and didn't really stick out. I mean, even Alex Yu, who's supposed to be the quote unquote bad guy, I guess. I'm trying very hard to be vague and not spoil, but Alex Yu is very generic and just sounds like, oh, typical older brother and all that stuff. Even Morgan Yu, when you have the weird moments where you send a video to yourself, it's like, I'm Morgan Yu and I have this situation and this is what you need to consider. And so that's why I'm saying a lot of the performances were generic at best and flat at worst. I have no problem saying that. And I did take points off for audio in that regard. Replay value and presentation. I'm actually going to say I think there's a lot of replay value to this because there are side quests that you can take on in Talos 1. I mean, you could go and do the main storyline if you want to, but I also think that it's worthwhile to do the side quests. You will get some items out of that. There is a crafting system in this game, so you want to be able to get as many items that are going to be helpful as you can. And the side quests can sometimes be entertaining. There was actually one that I found really cool where you were basically following the relationship between two people on the station, and one of them was a hardcore role player and the other one was trying very hard to understand that. So I did actually like a few of the side quests in there, and I think the replay value is worth it. Does it come together? For the most part, yes. Like I said, as a horror game, it kind of fails in that regard for me, and therefore I did take points off for that. But as a place to be able to go and explore, I couldn't necessarily give it too much of a hard time. It actually did pull off the BioShock formula, to my knowledge, or in my opinion, to the best way that it could, especially in space. Which is why I have no problem giving a final score for Prey of 7 out of 10. I think it's a solid C effort. I would be interested in what a sequel would do, and I probably in my spare time will go in and I think I was about 75% through the story when this review was going out. I might go and finish it just to see the multiple endings and all that, because there are multiple endings. You could choose to be good or evil, just like you could in BioShock. And I would be interested to see that if a sequel were to be announced. But on to the next question of, is it worth it? Currently, Prey is available on PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Windows, and is currently available for $39.99 US. Is it worth it that price? If you're a Bethesda fan, I can see it being worth that price. If you can get it on sale, obviously that's even better, but if you're a Bethesda fan, you're going to have no issue paying out $39.99, probably even getting a collector's edition if you already did that. For those who are coming in brand spanking new like I am, I would honestly wait until a solid price drop of at least $10, and then I think it's more worth it. I would also maybe wait until it goes on sale like on Steam or on the PlayStation Store via PlayStation Plus or Xbox One Gold, and see if you can get it for cheaper, because it may or may not work for you. And if $39.99 is a bit high to put out for the budget gamer anyway. And that's going to go ahead and do it for this review. So thank you guys so much for watching. And of course, I'll be back with the next review.